Welcome back to the Modern Firm Podcast. John and Darren back with you today with a very special guest who I'm pretty excited about. Personally, for sure, we've made a good connection, but also really professionally, he's got some really good stuff to talk to you about today. Darren's going to be a good conversation.
Yeah, I think it's going to be fantastic. I mean, just talking security sometimes in general can not be the funnest topic, but incredibly necessary. So I'm looking forward to this one.
It is. Hey, I want to start with this statement, and right out of the gate, give Mike a chance to make a comment. But 41% of small businesses right now are hit by a cybersecurity attack each year. I mean, if you just take a moment and go, what? And accounting firms, one of the number one targets for this. Mike, does this ring true to you? And tell me a little bit about your perspective on cybersecurity and kind of how you got to where you are.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and it's actually worse. So this stat, 41%, which feels high, that's in a 12-month period. A different report evaluates or found that about 94% of small businesses have experienced a cyber event at some point in their existence. Whew. And so when you expand the time horizon, the other thing that is really painful with those statistics is most of those firms, over 50%, are hit multiple times because they don't fully clean up. The attackers leave a back door, right? They may get double extortion of their systems being locked up, and then they have to pay a ransom. So the risk is real, and absolutely accounting firms are prime targets based upon the type of data that they have, their connections into larger organizations, and the trust that accountants build with their clients.
Hey, Mike, when you say cyber event, can you kind of define what you mean by a cyber event? Because I mean, 94% is a pretty high percentage. And so, I mean, I'm sure there's like a gamut there, but what's a cyber event?
Yeah. So, cyber event, there's a few different kind of industry definitions, but the way that I look at it relates to systems, access, or data. So it typically is unauthorized or unapproved access or exfiltration of a company's systems, a company's information, or a company's data.
Okay.
And that includes insider threats, so unauthorized, right? Somebody that is looking at exporting, accessing systems for a reason that is not aligned to their job responsibilities, as well as the bad external threat actors who are compromising systems.
That's awesome. I think before we go any further, Mike, I want to unpack. I mean, we hit that question right out front, but I want to unpack just a little bit about who you are. Mike Ellerhorst, CEO of NTM Advisory. But tell us just a little bit about your company, how you got to where you are, and we'll keep diving into this threat and what are the best ways to mitigate it.
Yeah. I would say I am an intellectually curious problem solver and I love solving problems at the intersection of business and technology. I started my career at PwC, spent about a decade in their advisory practice. And throughout that time, I supported projects, both operational technology projects, digital transformations, as well as information security, and found that I really view the world through much more of a risk-based lens. And so information security, IT risk, compliance, governance, this is the space that I have really found kind of my footing in. And I really have a passion for helping organizations understand and do something about it. About a year and a half ago, I started my own firm, NTM Advisory. NTM stands for Navigate the Maze, where for the people that are outside of the community, information security, IT community, sometimes compliance, sometimes risk can feel like a maze. Do I turn left? Do I turn right? Where is the end? Am I going to run into a dead end? And so, my goal is to help primarily small and medium-sized businesses better understand that maze, understand their risk posture, give them a map, build a roadmap, build a program, help advise on how they can navigate it, or even walk through that maze with them. So, to me, it's been a really rewarding and validating experience. Every company in today's economy is exposed and can be attacked, and the vast majority of organizations, they don't have the knowledge, the resources, the team members. They don't know what they don't know, and they don't know what to do. And so, one of the reasons I started my own firm was to empower those small business owners to protect what they're building and to defend against, this threat landscape that's constantly changing out there.
Mike, you used a word that I'm on the board of a bank, and we use this word a lot, which is posture, right? And risk posture in particular. And the way I see that, Mike, I'd love to hear what the real definition is, but it's like there's risk out there everywhere, and we need to decide what our posture is going to be against that, because it's really expensive to try to take that as near zero as possible, and it can also be really expensive to do nothing. So, defining, what your posture is for risk. Some may call it tolerance, I guess. Is that a fair way to think about that?
Yeah. I love the frame, Darren, and I've worked with a lot of financial services organizations. And so I'll say one, FS organizations are great at talking about and thinking about risk, because that's what they do, right? They price, financial products, they hedge their different risks, they manage their portfolio. I would also say, I would apply that same concept. I love talking with small business owners about risk because they understand it viscerally, right? They understand there's a risk of not meeting payroll if I can't close these next deals. There's a risk of, not being able to meet my client's expectations if my subcontractor doesn't show up. But I don't have the business, I don't have the capacity to hire on employees. So they very well understand risk and reward. Yeah. To me, one of the things that is I really focus on is giving language and that context of how do you think about cybersecurity, cyber attacks, and IT posture in the context of that risk, right? Like you said, it's very expensive. I would almost say, or I would say, it's impossible to drive risk to zero.
Yeah.
The most secure organization is an organization that is not connected to the internet. And that organization is probably not going to be making money, or not for very long, right? So every business in 2024 has some level of risk. Finding, calibrating what that is, and understanding that tolerance, and making sure that management and advisors and the board and the key stakeholders agree and align, that's the magic.
Great stuff. One of the things, Mike, as we had a conversation earlier today, that you brought up, and a phrase that I think is a really just sort of a unique view of security in general, is the concept of layered security. I'd love to hear your philosophy about layered security and talk just a little bit about what that means to you and why it's so important.
Yeah, this has been an evolution in kind of security mindset and practitioners probably over the last several decades, where and a major shifting point happened with COVID. So kind of rewind 20, 30 years, organizations could build their IT in like a fortress mentality. You had firewalls, you had systems in a physical office. Only those systems were connected. You knew where data could go out to the internet. You knew where data could come in. Now, and there's buzzwords around, the perimeter is dead, zero trust, identity is the new perimeter. There's a whole lot of things around that, but the reality is that's true. And this massive shift to hybrid work, remote work from anywhere, employees being empowered to do more and more of their job wherever they are from whatever device they're interacting with, that has fundamentally shifted and turned that fortress security model on its head. So, even using the old medieval analogy of having a castle with a moat, maybe with some alligators in that moat, and then if the castle walls are breached, then you have the keep where there's the additional fortress fortifications. In today's modern world, it's all about creating these different layers and different, what I would call, containment boundaries to mitigate the impact when that security event does occur, right? I would be curious, of the 6% in the small businesses in that study, whether it was actually a definition thing and they didn't understand fully the question, or if they truly have not been breached. And so it's really it's a matter of when, not a matter of if. And so my advice, the pragmatic approach that I bring to my clients, is create these layers so that you can identify when something is going wrong and be able to close off and mitigate, contain that potential damage when it does happen.
From a small business perspective today, Mike, this is super subjective, but I've got to think a lot of small businesses today are using a majority of their tools from some cloud provider. So whether their tech stack is, QuickBooks Online and HubSpot and Zoom, and, you pick the gamut of tools they're using. How do you think about layered security and mitigation in that world?
Yeah. So in many ways, it's been a really positive thing, because these small businesses, myself included, as I stood up NTM last year, you can inherit really good security and in many ways enterprise grade security from these software platforms, from these vendors. The double-edged sword is that a system is only as secure as you configure it. And unfortunately, a lot of small business owners just go with defaults. And Microsoft and Google are trying to push the industry in a secure by default mentality and posture. But the reality is it's not. And when you go down from those massive tech organizations into the smaller, platforms, it's expensive. Security is expensive. It's expensive to build those product features in. And unfortunately, sometimes you have to pay to a second or third tier to get to some of those security features. So, that it's a positive and a negative. And that's where I go back to that awareness and understanding, because yes, you can inherit. And from a contractual perspective, from a risk management perspective, you can actually build a lot of that into your customer agreements, your contracts, your limitations of liability, but you have to do it smartly. And in order to do it smartly, you have to understand what that ecosystem and what your posture looks like.
So would you say as you talk to those small businesses, probably one of the top level things that the small businesses have to be thinking about is, securing at least access, like passwords, right? Or passphrases. So some level of super high level, whether you're using a LastPass or OnePass or something else, trying to really tighten up your login structure. But what I heard you say too is built into a lot of those platforms are some pretty secure features, but you got to make sure they're turned on. Yep. So, going through the list of your tech stack and saying, how can I lock this down more and more and more and more? Are those two of the top things people can do?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the foundational things that I recommend, and I do for all of my clients, is establish inventories that you keep a check on. So your system inventories, what are your technical devices that could potentially access your environment? What's your software? So what are the different tools that you're using? Who are your users? Who are your authorized users? Those can be employees, they can be contractors, they can be trusted vendors, they can be guest users that you shared a SharePoint link with at some point. And then the last is around vendors. And the vendors and the software do have a bit of an overlap there. And to me, it's important. I recommend at least semi-annually. I try to drive quarterly or monthly, depending upon the size of the organization and the complexity of their tech stack. But take a look through that list, and we're in a relationship business, right? Professional services of a relationship. Establish those relationships with your vendors as well. Ask them questions. You don't have to be an expert in a product, right? All of your customers, Rightworks customers, are not experts in Rightworks. But I guarantee you, if one of your customers asks the question, hey, I'd love to understand a little bit more about the security that's built into the tool, you guys would show up, any day of the week. So vendors are willing to do that. Sometimes they don't know what their customers don't know. So it's so important, one, to understand who are you using? What is the software that you have? And then two, ask the questions, build that in and ask for help. I always encourage small business owners and small IT and security teams to kind of break that constrained thinking of our small team is responsible for all of this. No. Look outside. You've got advisors, you've got boards, you've got industry groups. Ask for help. Help is there. People want to help you succeed, and people want you to be secure in doing it.
Maybe it's because I'm such a simple-minded person, but your analogy of the castle and the moat really struck well with me. And I'm just thinking, like, all right, so I've got my castle and I got the moat and the alligators and all these layers of protection. Talk just really specifically about like some main entry points that hackers can break into. Let's just get really like, what are you seeing are the most common ways that hackers are breaking in to a small business?
Yep. So the three that I'll say is email, it's endpoints, and endpoints is tied to identities. And then the third is vendors. So your supply chain. So email continues to be, I think one of the email security platforms released their most recent report, and it was something like 68% of cyber events or ransomware events or introduction of malware started with email. Clicking on it, clicking on an attachment, opening a link. The unfortunate reality is humans are the weakest link in cybersecurity. But I've given some talks around flipping that on its head, where humans may be the weakest link, but they're also very trainable. And with the right information and the right tools, they can be a really big asset in protecting. So that user awareness training, it's annoying to require all of your team members to go through and watch these videos, to do those phishing simulation tests. But it's just so important. It's important to build that muscle memory and to have that practice.
Mike, I think the word posture can extend to your employees. And one of the things John and I used to spend time talking about is every firm, accounting firm, has a security posture. It just might not be very good. So whether it's they have one and they may not be thinking about it. So, I think working with your employees and helping your employees develop these postures and realize that it's important is critical for small business, for any business.
Yeah. One of the things that I've been trying to build with a couple of my clients is an employee security health check, where on a monthly basis or on a quarterly basis, you essentially serve up a view of what their personal risk posture looks like.
Such a
How
great
many
idea.
times did your Office 365, your Microsoft account, log into systems? How many different geographic locations did that account try to interact with? Maybe your system's blocked, maybe my system's blocked an attempt of Mike Ellerhorst at NTM Advisory to log in from Lithuania. If I am not served up that information, I wouldn't know. But having that awareness of what their posture is, you can't take action if you don't know, right? And so that's something I've gotten a lot of good feedback. it's hard to sometimes it's hard to distill down that information in a way that's understandable and consumable. But I agree entirely. Managing and thinking about that posture concept and that concept of risk at different dimensions, individuals, teams, business units, companies is really good.
Yeah. So number one was posture. What was number two?
Risk is, so every single company that I work with, I make sure that they have, or I sit down and review their risk register with them. And part of what I try and drive is this shifting mentality of security is not a technology problem. Security is a business challenge. And looking at and thinking about your IT and your cybersecurity risks in the context of your enterprise risk register is really, really, really powerful. It sets that context for firm owners. It sets that context for, we're investing X number of dollars in retaining our employees because people are our biggest asset. What are we investing in protecting their systems, right? It gives a lot of that business context.
Sorry, I may have asked that question wrong too, Mike. I think we were talking about entry points, and we talked about humans being the first one.
Gotcha.
What was the second one?
Yeah. So let's see. So phishing, so humans and email. The second is identities. So this, somebody buying a username and password combination on the dark web, somebody getting unauthorized access to a cloud system, and then the third one is vendors. And so your supply chain, and some of this is human based and others is system based. So rewind a couple years, SolarWinds, the attack that happened just before Christmas, was a supply chain attack where hackers embedded malicious software in a tool, SolarWinds, that was then distributed to all SolarWinds customers. And then when the bad actors wanted to deploy or activate that threat, they didn't individually have to hack into all those companies, right? They used a trusted channel to be able to get into those systems.
As a bank, Mike, vendors have become, I chair our risk committee. So our vendors have become, huge topic of discussion. Mm-hmm. Because, we're only as strong as that vendor who's, serving our ATMs or our core or whatever it is, right? So we can only be as strong as they can be in a lot of ways, unless we set up those layers and those moats and all the stuff, which we do.
Yep.
But it's a lot.
Yeah. It's an important dialogue, and it's happening, and we're seeing it embedded in different security frameworks and different regulations, where companies are no longer just expected to have controls around their own systems, right? And it's great to hear that, the bank that you're supporting, that's happening at the board level, thinking about and talking about mm-hmm. what is the ecosystem in which we are operating and why and how is that important. Tying back to accounting firms, think about, especially for the small accounting firms, you could be that weak link that introduces a vulnerability to one of your biggest customers. And that's one of the reasons, that's one of the things that I always try to, I hate using the fear, uncertainty, and doubt, the classic FUD to drive people to change action. But the reality is I've seen organizations lose their biggest customer because of a cyber failure or an event, even not loss of data, but if there's enough suspicion or uncertainty, your clients are going to go elsewhere and ask for that support. And so, that trust that you've built in order to access some very sensitive data, to have access to very sensitive systems, you may not think about it, and the staff accountant may not think about it in this way, right? But accounting firms play a very key role in the business ecosystem of their clients.
Yeah, that's such a valid point.
Mike, I as we close this out today, I just think, I'd love for you to talk us just a moment about the importance of being able to get help. One of the things that we talk about on this podcast often is that you're not alone. And we bring on somebody like you to show that you don't have to go this alone. Can you just talk about what you do and how you actually come alongside a small business to help them mitigate some of these risks?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I pitch and I'm really proud to bring to my clients is that I meet them where they are. And no two organizations are at the same spot on their journey, and no two organizations have the same risk tolerance. So I think that flexibility and that understanding and that willingness to put my feet in the shoes of my clients is so important. So when I'm thinking about putting myself on the other end, I would say make sure that when you are talking with potential partners, potential advisors, potential consultants, make sure that they're asking questions about your business and not just giving you, here's a report that every single company should do because it's a good report that we have. Like, why? Why does that matter to my business? The other thing that I do, and has been a core tenet from day one, is the concept of you can give a person a fish and feed him for a day, or you can teach him how to fish and feed him for a lifetime. Every single one of my client engagements includes not just a level of knowledge transfer, but a level of teaching, coaching, and mentorship, because I get it. My services are expensive. A 10-person accounting firm, it doesn't make business sense to pay for a full-time information security practitioner. And oftentimes, even vCISO, fractional CISO is becoming more and more prevalent. But oftentimes, especially for those very small companies out there, that is even more expensive than they can handle. And so, to me, I would love to help more organizations in that capacity and be in their Rolodex, be in their phone book, be in their contact list. Nobody has a Rolodex anymore. And be that person that they can call when something bad happens. But I also, I'm a realist and I'm a business owner myself. And, a lot of businesses can't afford that. So, find a partner that you trust. Make sure that the approach that you're taking is tied to your own business, and also think about it as a journey. Think about it as a continuous process. You are never done with information security. We are not becoming less. The cyber threats out there, the risks out there are not becoming less. It is just going to continue to grow and evolve. And we could spend a whole nother hour talking about AI and what that's doing. But don't think about it as a project. Don't think about it as a one time a year. Think about how you can build processes to continuously check back in and manage your posture going forward.
Mike, great conversation today. I know this is simplistic, but I think about this issue as almost like I used to wake up in the middle of my night and my dad was watching Westerns, and there's always this black hat that is scary, and then the white hats come riding over the horizon. And I think of you as a white hat. And I think the more we can surround ourselves with white hats, and I'm sure it's not as simple as black hats and white hats, but it does feel as though we need the cavalry. We need somebody to come alongside us. And I appreciate your thought leadership. I appreciate what you're doing for the people we care about, running small businesses and their teams and their clients. And I would just, if you're listening to today and you're looking for a white hat, find a guy like Mike who can be on your side and help you navigate through this risk. Mike, it was great to meet you. I think this is the beginning of a long friendship. Darren, it was good as always.
Yeah, Mike, really enjoyed it. Great conversation. Like your perspective on this.
My pleasure. It was great spending time with you guys today. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks for listening to the Modern Firm Podcast today. We'll see you next time.